In June of 2010, I got a job working in nuclear security. I loved it and made good money. I was contract security. Most of the people were great and fun to work with. In September of 2012, I found out I was pregnant. This is important later. The security company I worked for hired several new guards in 2012. One of them I'll call H. H was a rather small, thin guy in his mid-40s, and he seemed nice at first. That is until I left the day shift to work nights. We would work from 5:30 p.m. until 6 a.m. Everything seemed fine at first, no problems. As the nights went on, H would start smarting off to me for no reason. Basically, he started acting like a jerk. I have no idea why this man was being so mean. I'm a Christian, and decided to kill him with kindness. I had found that he and his wife were getting divorced, and he was having a hard time with it. I felt bad for him, because I had 2 divorces in my 3 marriages. Whenever I'd ask H a question, he would scream at me over the radio that we carried, or I'd be walking to a new post, and if he was already walking by, he would always run into me hard, knocking me away. I forgot to mention that I'm 5'11" and not a pushover. I really thought he was having a hard time and taking it out on me. At this job, if they were short on people, they would force overtime. This night, H was forced to work on the weekend on a different crew. I felt bad for him having to work on the weekend, because he was supposed to visit with his kids. I called and took his shift so that he could see his kids. The next time I worked with H, he brought me a letter from a so-called friend and asked me to rewrite it so he could send it to his wife. He then apologized to me for his rudeness. I really didn't want to, and tried to tell him nicely no. But H insisted, so I reluctantly agreed. That's when he started telling me about his wife and how crazy she was. He tried to get her some help. He said she wasn't stable enough to get full custody of their kids. A couple of nights later, he started telling me things that he would love to do to her. I really want to strangle her and watch the life drain out of her, he would say. If I decided to kill someone, no one would ever figure out where the bullet came from. Then I could get a plane and take my kids somewhere where no one would ever find us. H then looked at me with very cold eyes and told me, "If you ever tell anyone what I said," and I quote, "I'll cut your heart out and watch you bleed." At this point, I was scared beyond belief. I went to my supervisor and told him about the threat. They pulled H's security clearance. When they did that, he glared at me with the scariest look I've ever seen. My boss told me to make a police report, so I documented what happened. It turns out that H had been arrested for harassment of some older woman at Publix. I still don't know how he got his job in security with that record. In January of 2013, I had taken a layoff because I was considered high risk. I am type 2 diabetic. I had gotten in touch with his wife and told her about the threats he made to her. Later, I got a subpoena to testify at court. When H found out about it, he started following me. He went to my husband's job looking around. Then I started getting phone calls where you could hear someone breathing, but never said anything. H started calling the manager of my apartment, asking which unit I lived in, what my vehicle looked like, and so on. This went on for about 2 months, scaring me to death. In March, I went to court, and when he saw me, he grinned an evil grin like I've never seen before. I wasn't called to testify, and the stalking stopped. I later found out that he had been arrested for breaking into the house where his wife was staying, and he had several firearms in his possession that he wasn't supposed to have. When his wife moved to another house and went shopping, she came back and saw her home was on fire. H was in the driveway, grinning and laughing while the firefighters were trying to put it out. "I guess you'll remember to turn off the coffee maker next time," he said. I've only seen him once since then. For 3 months, I was absolutely terrified of him. I certainly hope that I never see him again. I worked nights at a gas station in my town. It was not far from my apartment, and therefore, I was able to walk to and from work most days, at least in the summer. It can be pretty creepy walking at night, especially because my neighborhood has a bad crime problem. I have many stories to back that up, and this is one of them. The gas station was along a quiet road. Its neon sign glowed brightly against the dark night sky. It was a modest establishment, with a small convenience store filled with snacks, drinks, and various other items. The gas pumps were well in view when I was standing behind the counter. As the night settled in, I was pretty bored. You can only scroll on social media for so long. Not more than 10 customers had come in the whole night, and it was over 5 hours so far. It was 3 a.m. Behind the counter, I sat on a stool, my eyes heavy from the long hours of the night shift. I stared at the rows of shelves neatly stocked. I had gotten all my work done in the first hour of my shift. On that particular night, the atmosphere seemed unusually still. There were no customers in sight. I glanced out into the parking lot and saw a car parked in the corner just beyond the pumps. It seemed out of place. It was a large SUV, black, I think, but it was hard to tell in the darkness. I strained my eyes to get a better look. I wasn't suspicious yet. There just wasn't anything more interesting to do. What I witnessed next was terrifying, though. 2 burly men forcibly approached it, carrying another man who seemed to be struggling. They shoved the man into the back of the SUV. My heart skipped a beat, and a rush of adrenaline hit me. In a state of shock, I didn't know what to do, although I know I should have dialed 911, or at least tripped the alarm. Before I could do either, one of the men glanced up. We locked eyes through the store window. Without a moment's hesitation, the man abruptly stormed into the store. His heavy footsteps echoed across the linoleum floor. He was a big guy, at least 6'2" and muscular looking, but also slightly overweight. He had a double chin, but looked strong. I'm sure he could break me in half if he wanted to. I'm a 5'7" guy, and about 120 pounds. He approached the counter, not even trying to seem friendly. He began interrogating me about what I had seen. At this point, I was way too scared to hit the alarm. I didn't think I could do it without him noticing, even though its foot activated. I denied seeing anything, hoping to deflect his suspicions. The tension in the air was palpable, but I think he believed me. I was really terrified, but I must have done a decent job of not showing it. My guess is that the man thought it was too dark, so that I didn't see anything. After several long seconds, the man's gaze loosened, and he begrudgingly left the store. I watched out the window as the SUV drove away. My thoughts were with whoever the man was in the back. I didn't have much time to help him, so I called the police and reported what happened. I waited anxiously for them. Luckily, no new customers came in. When they finally arrived, I greeted the officers. Without wasting any time, they checked out our security footage. However, the car had managed to park just out of range of the gas station's cameras, leaving no concrete evidence to follow. Additionally, I was not able to get the license plate, or even a very good description of the SUV. I gave them a description of the man, but that was it. The officers waited with me for a few hours, in case the men came back. After I clocked out, I began my walk home on foot. My senses were heightened, and my mind was still reeling from the encounter. I was pretty creeped out for a while. I regretted not calling an Uber, even though it was a short walk. When I was over halfway home, a car slowly pulled up beside me. Other than that, the street was pretty much empty. I looked over, and I was pretty sure it was the SUV from before. When the window rolled down, that was confirmed. The men inside the car offered me a ride, their words laced with an unsettling charm. I tried to pretend I didn't recognize them. With a shaking voice, I declined and kept walking. I looked forward, trying to pretend they were not there, but they were. They were following me slowly down the street. Without warning, the vehicle stopped, and one of the men got out. His eyes locked onto me like a predator, eyeing its prey. I looked back, and panic consumed me. It was the big guy from before. I sprinted away, looking back every few seconds. Like I said, The guy was big, therefore I was able to outrun him pretty easily. He was only chasing me for less than a minute. Even though he was no match for me on foot, I knew that if he caught me, I would be done. The stakes were high. A single slip could have been the end of me. I called the police again, but they were never able to catch the men. I quit my job at the gas station after this incident because I was too scared to do that shift again. Unfortunately, this is not the only incident of that kind that happened to me. It's a really dangerous job, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I used to work as a security guard at a retail building in the heart of the city. It was on a side street, well away from the commotion of the city's nightlife. I wouldn't have it any other way. I was a student at the time, and I would go out sometimes, but the shift went by faster when I could be alone, without any distractions. I would use that time to read or play games on my phone. It was a pretty easy and boring job mostly, but one night something happened that I can't explain. It made me question everything. I was sitting in the security office on my phone. In front of me were several computer monitors with the security camera's feed. I looked up at them now and then, but they were really no different than still images most of the time. Out of nowhere, I started to hear a strange noise, like somebody walking around upstairs. It was late and I was tired, so I thought it might have been my imagination. I was curious though, so I decided to closely monitor the security cameras. I looked up from my phone and watched the monitors, trying to detect any movement on the screens. I scanned through the feeds, and I caught sight of a figure, a shadowy silhouette, lurking on the second-floor hallway. It moved with an eerie fluidity, appearing to disappear in the dimly lit corridor. Once it was gone for good. I couldn't find it on any of the other cameras, even though there was another, with an angle that should have shown the area where it was. This was no hallucination. There was somebody in that building. I was sure of it. The sound and then this. Gathering my composure, I swiftly reached for my phone and dialed the police. I explained what I saw. Within minutes, they arrived. They scoured the building, searching every floor and every hallway for any sign of that mysterious intruder. However, to my surprise, there was no trace of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I could tell the police thought I was imagining things, and to be honest, I couldn't blame them. Especially because we could not find the footage where I saw the figure. I almost started to question it myself. It was so real, though. I started to question my own sanity, desperately trying to find a rational explanation for what I saw. The police left and I was alone again. As the clock ticked on, I heard a sharp crash. It was the sound of glass breaking through the building. Panic gripped me as I quickly switched to the security camera displaying the second-floor area. What I saw confirmed my worst fears. A broken window on the second floor. Clear evidence of an intruder. It was real. I was right all along. I dialed the police once again and gave them an update. They assured me that help was on the way, and I waited anxiously. I had no idea who was up there with me, or where he was. When the police finally arrived, they seemed somewhat annoyed with me. They must have thought I was crazy. However, when they saw the window, their tone changed. They called for backup. The whole building was locked down, and again they found nothing. No sign of an intruder, apart from the broken window. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. Perhaps the intruder jumped out of the window, but it was the second floor, and it led to a paved alley. Nobody could make that jump without being seriously hurt. There was nothing stolen from the building either. There's no explanation that makes very much sense. If not for the broken window, then maybe I would still think I was crazy. You see interesting things working nights as a janitor, such as a life-size doll under the bank president's desk. You learn some hilarious quirks, like an official wanting the vacuum marks perfectly parallel on his carpet because he gets upset otherwise. Sometimes you see things you can't quite explain, like the reflection of a dog in a mirror that is never there when you turn around, but shows up night after night. Some things are quite chilling, like when the building music would switch on by itself as I turned the lights out. Of course, being in empty buildings alone at night made everything take on an extra dimension of spookiness. Only one thing really and truly scared me, however, because it was more tangible than a mirror dog ever could be, and potentially more dangerous than glitchy music. It was a miserable night, with blizzard conditions that are not uncommon in the winter here. The wind was howling, snow was blowing, it was dangerously cold. Altogether the kind of night you don't want to be out in. My last building for the night was on the outskirts of town, in a quiet business plaza by a large public park. There were no nearby houses, and nothing in the area that was open at night. In short, there was no reason for anyone to be out, especially in that weather. This building was not a spooky one, just isolated. I made an absolute habit of always locking the doors of the buildings I was working on, because even in a safe town, a female janitor alone at night seems like too easy of a target. That night was no different. I know I locked that door, and if I hadn't closed it firmly, the strong wind would have blown it open. I went about my usual routine, turning all the lights on all 3 floors, and then setting up my supplies. The building had an odd layout, with a sort of bird's nest loft that the boss's office was in. It overlooked the main floor. I usually started with the loft, and headed up there, but I realized I had forgotten something and headed back down. I was distracted, and this building always annoyed me, but I wasn't listening to music, and I didn't have earbuds in. I was reasonably alert. So I was a little surprised to find the side door standing wide open, with the wind rushing in and snow already drifting up. I froze a bit, because there's no reason that door should be open. I checked the parking lot quickly, in case the building owner had come back for some reason and showed up in the middle of the night. No cars were there but mine. After locking the door, I started searching the building, starting with the basement. I didn't see anybody, and nothing was disturbed. As my search reached the loft level, the reflection of the basement lights in the stairway went out. Then the lights on the main floor went out, and I heard the door bang open and rattle in the wind. So I shut myself in the office for a while. Eventually, I admitted that I had to finish the building, or I would probably get fired. So I locked that door for the 3rd time and turned the lights back on. Then I cleaned faster than I ever have before. I should have called the police. Luckily, nothing happened that night, or any night afterwards.